And today I have some really big news, some exciting announcements to share. For the last few months, I've kind of been teasing that we have some big announcements coming in 2024, and now is the time. All the research has been done, all the discernment has taken place, the big and key decisions have been made, and now is the time to share. Some of you don't know the story. I'll bring you up to speed. Others have forgotten the story, but just like it says in the Old Testament, it's good to retell and remember the story of God in our midst. About 4.5 years ago, Fresenius Kidney Center gave our leadership team a tour of their 7,200 square foot building, which is adjacent to our property, right out those doors and across the green space, located at 1213 Riverside Avenue. And at the end of the tour, their real estate agent looked at us and she said, "Would the Vineyard be interested in purchasing this building to expand your campus?" And Rick Olmsted was the lead pastor at the time. I was kind of under his wing. He was training me to be his successor. And graciously, he said, "I'm getting ready to retire. This is a decision that's going to impact Jeff's leadership a lot more than mine, so you should ask him." And everybody turned their eyes. This was like the first big decision that I had to make. Everyone's eyes turned and looked at me. And in a moment that I can only describe as a gift of faith from the Holy Spirit, I looked the real estate agent in the eye and I said, "We're not interested in buying your building, but we would love for you to donate it to us. And if you do, we'll use it to serve the poor in our community." And everybody started laughing in the room. Way more than that. There's like, who's this young kid asking for $1 million donation the first time we ask him to open his mouth, right? And a couple weeks later, I remember asking the church, "Pray with me, we're gonna pray for this building." And I got a similar response. There were chuckles here and there spattered around the room. And I even kind of looked back and laughed at myself. But in the moment, I doubled down and I said, "No, seriously, we want you to donate the building. And if you do, we'll renovate it and we'll use it to serve the poor in our community." And as the time went on, they didn't donate it in the moment. As time went on, we began to pray. Almost every Sunday after church, I got my kids in the car, we drove past that building, and we prayed that the Lord would donate that space to our church so that we could use it to serve the under-resourced in our community. And we prayed for months, and many of you started to join us in those prayers. I know this because you would text me, "Jeff, are there any updates? I'm continuing to pray with you." I know many of you walked the parking lot and asked God with me that the Lord would get and make a way for that building to be donated. Well, as time went on, they came back to me and they said, okay. How about we sell it to you for $800,000? Which would have been a really good deal, by the way. That's like a third off. And I said, "No, but if you'll donate it, we'll use it to serve the poor in our community." They didn't budge. 6 months happened, or 6 more months took place, and then COVID hit. And everybody kind of lost their mind a little bit during COVID. And so everyone was a little bit nervous. And about 6 months into COVID, they came to me and they said, "Okay, Jeff, here's not 800, how about $500,000? This is like half off, by the way. This is a screaming deal. This is something maybe we should have called a board of directors meeting for or something, but I just kindly said, no, I don't want to do a building campaign in the middle of COVID. I know we're going to have to replace the roof. I know we're going to have to replace the walls. I know there's a lot of work to be done, but if you'll donate the building, we'll renovate it and we'll use it to serve the poor in our community." Well, Easter 2021, about 6 months after that last conversation, wouldn't you know it, they called me up and they said, "Let's meet at such and such title company. We're ready to donate the building to you. And we'll cover all of the property expenses. We'll cover the insurance for all the prorated months that you're going to incur. We'll bring a check to you and the keys to the building." And so about a week before Easter, I signed the deed, got the keys, and got a check to help cover the expenses for the first year of ownership. And looking back, I can just confidently tell you that this was a miracle. That a for-profit medical company doesn't look at a small church in their area and say, "You know what? $1.2 million asset. Why don't you guys have it? Why don't you guys have it? We'll just donate the space to you. It was a miracle, and it was God's gift to our church. And after the building was donated, some of you know, I started looking at every possible scenario and every possible outcome on how we could use that space in our community. There were all kinds of roads that I went down, and on my best days, I would tell you it was part of our discernment process and due diligence, but truthfully, on our worst days, it felt like nothing but dead ends, right? And I remember crying out to God, God, you donated this building to us. What do you want us to do with it? Why does everything I try to do end up in a dead end? What are you actually expecting us to do in this space? And about 6 months ago, I was praying to God about the building, and the Lord reminded me, he said, Jeff, what was the first thing that you said when you asked for this building? Wasn't it, if you donate the building, we'll fix it up and we'll use it to serve the poor and under-resourced in our community? Isn't that the first thing that you said? That we, as the Vineyard, would remember our history, our long line of caring for the city with compassion and care, that we would renovate the space and steward it and own it and use the space to share the gospel and advance the kingdom of God in our area. You know, the Vineyard Church has always been about caring for the poor and leading the way with compassionate ministry. And I feel like the Lord was saying, will you do it again in a new season, in a new way, in a new building? For the last few years, we've done a series every January called Love Foco. And the foundational verse for Love Foco has been Jeremiah 29:7. Work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. And I can stand before you today and everyone tuning in online and confidently tell you that God is asking us to lead the way in praying and blessing and working for the peace and prosperity of our entire area. And as we do this, and as we steward the building He got donated to us in the first place, we'll be joining God's mission, transforming all things. So from this day forward, our old donated building, the old kidney dialysis center, the old kidney center, or the building at 1213, or that one over there, or whatever name you called it in the last few years, it doesn't have to be known by the old kidney center anymore, because what started as a sermon series 3 years ago and has continued on is now being turned into a building at the donated space. The future of 1213 will be known as the Love Foco Resource Center. The Love Foco building. Boy, I can't tell you how happy I am to hear you clap at that one. It's kind of sweating that one out a little bit, actually. In one statement, here's what you can expect. The Love Foco Resource Center will serve up to 1,500 families a month through resourcing of physical needs, evangelism, and discipleship. 1,500 families a month will be impacted through the Love Foco Resource Center, the love of our Vineyard Church, and most importantly, the love of Jesus Christ. Next week and every week in January, I'm going to share a little bit more of the story and how this is going to play out. Next week, I'm going to talk about how we're going to reach 1,500 families a month, the types of resources that you can expect will be present in that space. But this week, I felt like it was important to remind our church that this all began with a miracle. It all began with God moving on our behalf. And truthfully, we need to remember this because it's going to require a whole bunch more miracles on the way. Before there's a Love Foco Resource Center, there will need to be a Love Foco giving campaign. But remembering the miracle of how it all started is a story that we need to tell over and over and over again. The gracious hand of the Lord is upon us, Vineyard. He is moving before us. He's creating a way for us to impact and serve and influence our area with the kingdom of God and the gospel of Jesus Christ. As I share all of this information, it dawns on me now would be a really important time to invite you to an upcoming event in our church called Vision Night. I bet you can imagine at least part of what we're going to talk about at Vision Night. Vision Night is a night dedicated to the future, key objectives, and kind of the vision of our church in the upcoming year. Childcare is available. We would just ask that you give us a heads up before you come so we can have the right amount of workers in that space. And all the details can be found at votrweekly.org. If you can make it to Vision Night this year, I just want to give a personal request. I would ask that you would come. That somehow, some way, you would circle that date on your calendar and you would come to Vision Night, because it's probably the most important night that we've ever had as a church. We'll be sharing a few different key objectives, but this is kind of a big rock. And we're going to be talking a lot about the Love FOCO Resource Center. So that's where we're headed. 1,500 families a month by the grace of God. It started with a miracle. Pray with me for many more miracles along the way, and pray that God would be glorified as we serve him and serve our city together. Let's pray together, asking God's blessing on this building and also on our message, because I do intend to preach this morning from God's word. Let's pray with me. Well, as promised, I had told you that I'm going to start each Sunday in the month of January sharing a little bit more information about what God's placed on our hearts and how we're going to move forward with utilizing this building that was miraculously donated to our church just outside those doors and across the green space that's covered in snow right now to 1213 Riverside. And I want to share more about that story. If you missed last week, I would really encourage you to listen to the message from last Sunday, because the first 10 minutes, I really retell the story of how that building was donated to us in the first place, how God began that miracle, and how we're going to continue to seek more miracles as we step forward into stewarding that building for the kingdom of God. You know, it's going to take a fair amount of work to renovate that space, and it's going to cost a bit to fix it up, but it was donated to us for free. And so we're starting with like $1 million asset in our favor, and we're building from there. Last week, I shared more about that story and how we no longer have to call it the old donated building or the weird thing out there we don't know what we're going to do with, or the old kidney center. Now we can call it by its new name, the name that we feel like God gave us, called the Love FOCO Resource Center. And through, we can cheer that. That's good. Through the Love FOCO Resource Center, we're going to be serving up to 1,500 families a month through reaching basic needs and providing resources, of course, sharing our faith and inviting individuals and families that we engage with into a lifelong and empowering discipleship relationship. But if you just look around the room, and even if you imagine like 500 people at the online service, you realize that even our church doesn't currently serve 1,500 people a month. We're not that size of a church. So how on earth are we going to serve 1,500 families a month in that new building? I mean, that's a lot of people. And so today I want to spend a little time talking about the strategies and the ministries that are going to help us along the way. Over the course of the last 6 months, I've been meeting with Christian nonprofits from around the city who have a similar heart to ours here at the Vineyard, a heart to serve and to care for the under-resourced in our community. And after a few conversations with these nonprofit leaders, it became glaringly clear that left to ourselves, we might be able to serve 100 or 200 families on our own. But if we somehow could unite our ministries together, if we could join together as we follow God with one another, then our impact, our potential to impact, will grow dynamically. And so I want to tell you at least about a few organizations this morning that we're partnering with, and I think the list is going to slowly grow, but I want to start with these three because you might recognize them. We actually already have ministry partnerships with the three that are up on this next slide. You'll see Serve 6-8, Christ Clinic, and that other logo is for Alpha Pregnancy Center. I want to talk about how they're coming alongside the Vineyard Church and the Love FOCO Resource Center to help serve 1,500 families a month. Let's talk about Serve 6-8 first. You might recognize Serve 6-8. They're the organization that has the Adopt-A-Tree all over northern Colorado around Christmas time. Of course, we already partner with them through our Thanksgiving and Christmas outreach. And through conversations with Serve 6-8, they have agreed to stock our shelves and to provide a clothing store for us every single week. They'll back up a truck to the Love Foco Resource Center and unload their inventory into our space so that we can give it away as freely as we've received it. And that's good for a lot of different reasons. One of them is that means I'll never have to stand in front of you and ask for more cans of green beans and peanut butter because Serve 6-8 is going to deliver the truck, right? But they're also going to train us in inventory. They're going to train us in how to really care for the families that we engage with, how we can engage with a long-term discipleship relationship with them, and how we can make sure that there's investment on both sides of that relationship. Incredibly excited about what Serve 6-8 has agreed to do. You might know that they recently moved down to Loveland because they got access to a much larger facility. But when they moved further south, it kind of created a vacancy in North Fort Collins, an area where there's quite a bit of need. And so now they're allowing the Love Foco Resource Center to be their northernmost distribution center. They're going to basically use all of their services in and through our space. And Vineyard Church, we get to be the volunteers to help be the hands and feet of Jesus as we reach our community. I also want to talk about Christ Clinic. Christ Clinic right now uses our space on an occasional Saturday. They set up and tear down our kids' wing so that they can provide free health care to anyone who needs to see a doctor or a nurse or need to be provided health care for whatever situation they're in. And they're doing a great job. They're doing a great job, but it is set up, tear down, set up, tear down, set up, tear down over and over and over again. And it's a real medical clinic, which means they have real medical records. So then they take those records, they put them in a folder, they lock their car doors, they drive home, and they put them in a personal filing cabinet behind locked doors. And the ability to have follow-up appointments and to help fill prescription drugs, all of those things begin to go down because they don't have a regular and consistent space they can count on. But now with the Love Foco Resource Center, as we dedicate space for their free healthcare clinic, the expansion of their ministry is going to grow tenfold or more. Not only just because of operational hours, but because there's going to be a brick and mortar place where people can count on to go to have follow-up care with doctors, physicians, nurses, PAs, the whole bit. They're going to be able to have walk-ins. And over 65% of the people that they see are also food insecure. So as you see a doctor with Christ Clinic, you'll also be able to get groceries for a week to really care for your family. So there's going to be all kinds of cross-pollination and ministry happening all under one roof just outside of those doors. And then on top of that, Alpha Pregnancy Center, they're also on the list. I'm excited to announce that they'll be opening a baby boutique in our space for moms and dads who are expecting. On Tuesday nights, they're going to offer parenting classes and prenatal classes for families, because one of the things I've always loved about Alpha Pregnancy Center is they're not just pro-birth, but they're pro-life. They want to walk with families for the longevity of them raising those kids, and it's going to be really, really special to be a part of that as well. Of course, all of these nonprofits are outside of our church, but we have all kinds of things happening inside of our church as well. We have families ready to teach ESL or English as a second language. We have a car care ministry that's been thriving longer than I've been here at this church. And we have recovery groups that will continue to offer their services, and on and on and on we go. If you can kind of imagine the Love Foco Resource Center then being almost like a nonprofit hub where underneath our umbrella, so many other ministries and programs can come and find a home. And through our local church, we'll be able to provide a comprehensive and holistic care package to families and individuals in need. It's not a perfect comparison because they're much larger in scale, but if you think about what Convoy does when they enter into a nation across the world and they offer all of these different services while making the local church famous, that's what we're going to try to do, except at a smaller scale and with people that you see about your day as you go about your day and your work week. They're going to be folks from our community, in our backyard, part of our local church and beyond. Just imagine kind of what it would be like on a Saturday morning, perhaps, with all these ministries taking place. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith, with their couple of kids kind of in tow in the back seat, they drive to the Love Foco Resource Center. And through a prearranged meeting with our car care ministry, they're able to drop their car off for maintenance and and minor repairs. And while their car is being worked on, they can go in and see a doctor, and their kids can see a doctor. After they see a physician, they can walk down the hallway. They can sign up for Celebrate Recovery if that's a service they want to participate in. They could be invited to our Easter services or our summer VBS or cross-training sports camp. After that, they could walk down the hallway, get groceries for a week, get clothing for their kids that are growing out of their old clothes. They could go to the baby boutique and get diapers and wet wipes for an expecting child. And all while this is all happening, their car is being fixed, and they could walk out, hop back into their car, and drive home. And cars and transportation, this is like of utmost importance for families who are under-resourced so that they can continue to thrive. Now you're talking about X amount of dollars that they've saved that they can put towards maybe first month's rent or catching up on utility bills, a variety of different services that now we're empowering them to participate in. You're talking about coming alongside of families and helping them break the cycles of generational poverty so that they can thrive in and around our community. We're talking about life change, transformation. And it's gonna be a journey to get there. This is like future Saturdays, because I said we still have to renovate the building, and we're gonna need to follow a whole bunch of miracles to raise the funds to do that. We'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. But if you think about having this comprehensive plan where anybody can come to the Love Focal Resource Center and be served in the name of Jesus, the fruit of that is us truly joining God's mission of transforming all things, one individual, one family at a time. It will be a building that has become the best friend for our city, the Love Focal Resource Center. Again, I want to invite you to Vision Night on Wednesday night, January 24th. Wednesday night, January 24th, we have childcare available. This is a really important night for our church. All the info's at votrweekly.org, and it would mean a ton to our staff if you could come to that evening, because we'll talk about all the key objectives for the upcoming year, but we'll talk a lot about this particular space and how you can be involved through sacrificial giving, through volunteering, and through advocating and helping us get the word out about what's going to be happening in this space. Next week, I'm going to share a lot more about the team, the greater team that's going to make this happen, that has been making this happen, because it's not just a Jeff Faust show. Thank God I don't have to have all these pieces in my head, because it wouldn't happen without the team that God is sending around this church. We'll talk more about that. But I'd like to pray, again, not only for God's blessing to continue to be poured out on that space, but I'm planning on preaching this morning from the Bible, and so we want to ask God's blessing on that time as well. Won't you join me in prayer? And part of those plans, of course, have to do with 1213 Riverside, which is a building that I've been talking about 10 minutes or so every Sunday before I preach. I'm going to continue doing that today, because if you haven't heard, someone donated a 7,200 square foot building to our church adjacent to our actual property. It's like right outside these doors, and now we are the proud owners of this new building, which is, it's incredible. I talk with like church planning friends who would love a building, and I'm like, I know, we're kind of spoiled. Like, we have 3 now, and 1 just got donated to us. I don't know actually how to tell you that story, but press through, it'll get better. I don't know. I don't know what to tell my friends who are doing that, but we have this beautiful little triangle now. All 3 buildings look drastically different. We're going to be working on that in the future, trying to unify our campus together. But we have this wonderful triangle of properties, and we've been praying and asking God for a long time, what do you want us to do? And over the last few weeks, I've been sharing how we really feel like God's calling us to renovate that space and turn it into what we're going to be calling the Love Focal Resource Center, where collectively and with other nonprofits and a lot of volunteers from within this room, we'll be able to serve 1,500 families a month with a comprehensive and a holistic care package where all under one roof they can get everything that they need to break the generational cycles of poverty, thrive this side of heaven, and experience an invitation to the life of our local church, and most importantly, the love of Jesus Christ. 1,500 families a month. And it's going to take a whole team to pull that off, right? I cannot, and we cannot, just as a staff or as a church, do this alone. But thankfully, God is sending all kinds of people alongside of us to make these efforts, to help our efforts move forward. And I want to highlight both some of the volunteers that are going to be working on this project, as well as some of the hired help and professional help that's going to make the vision of the Resource Center a reality. I want to start by just acknowledging the church's board of directors, particularly Daryl Schunig, who's been a huge help to me. I mean, these are a group of people that I report to. They keep me accountable, and I'm so grateful for their accountability and leadership in my life. They're helping with contracts around the Love Focal Resource Center, financial preparations and transparency. They're making sure that also I get to continue to be a pastor instead of like a project coordinator and general contractor, which we're all really happy about because that would fail miserably, and it just wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good at all. Last week I talked about George, who leading up our car care ministry. Of course, he's been doing that for years. We're just going to help prop him up and give him the resources he needs to serve more and more families. Doug Holbrook, who's in this room today. Doug, you can wave if you will. Doug was reading scripture, actually. So Doug's over there. He's dedicated a large percentage. Yeah, we can applaud for Doug. That's good. Doug has had a unique place in the tech and corporate world of helping visions become a reality and kind of executing on those visions. And now he's going to be able to leverage everything he's learned in that world to help the Love Focal Resource Center come to life. And so thankful for Jeff Taylor and Debbie Barlin, 2 volunteers in our church as well, who are creating a grant writing team for our church. They are research and writing experts. They're finding all kinds of pockets of money that are out there in this world from family foundations and trusts and grant money, and they're both researching the impact that the Love Focal Resource Center is going to have on our community, and also the best ways that we can communicate that, because it's going to cost a bit of money to renovate that space. If you've ever done anything with Fort Collins, you know there's quite a few permits and quite a few standards that you have to hit, and this is going to come as a shock to many of you, but none of our properties meet those current codes. And like a little snag in a nice shirt, once you pull that, there's a whole chain of events that has to take place, and they all have a price tag. And so, of course, we're going to launch a giving campaign here at this church next week. I'm excited to share all of that with you. But also, there's opportunity to gain resources from outside of our church, and we're going to exhaust every opportunity that still aligns with our core values and what we want to do in this space. And I'm so excited to move that ball forward. Jeff and Debbie are making a large part of that happen. And then when it comes to paid professional help, we have Airbnb architects and Elder Construction who are part of our team. And just a fun side note, one of the elders in Elder Construction actually met his wife at this church before they moved away to another community. But it's just kind of fun, full circle. I mean, they met each other here, and now they're working on this space in the future. And I'm so thankful for both of those companies because, listen, I've spent way too much time learning about city codes and permitting and the requirements and process. If you ever want to have a 2-hour conversation with me about like the trees to parking spot ratio that we don't meet, or permeable concrete that has to be a part of this renovation, or pedestrian and emergency vehicle access, I have too much information in my head to keep to myself. I would love to share it with you. And all of these things, they're like really important things, right? It's what makes Fort Collins so wonderful and so beautiful. But again, once you start down this road, you realize we have to get caught up to speed a little bit. And all of those things will be addressed. They'll all be addressed. They all have a price tag. But the end result of all of this will be a campus that can be used not just in our generation, but for generations. It'll be a facility that will be hospitable to our guests and welcome them into the life of a local church, but introduce them to the love of Jesus as we present a hospitable space for all of our guests of honor in a place that doesn't feel like the leftovers, but it feels like the place that was designed just for our community. I'm so excited to share more and more about that, and it would be remiss if I didn't remind you again of a very important evening coming up on Wednesday called Vision Night. Wednesday, this room, 6:30 p.m. Remember this, Wednesday, this room, 6:30 p.m. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful night, and if I can dangle any carrot at all, it's that I have amazing drawings and conceptual reviews of what this space will look like, and at Vision Night, we're going to share all of those, and so you won't want to miss it. Listen, the projected cost and the projected impact of this space, it's going to be an amazing journey to be on as a local church community. That lives changed and families impacted in the moment, but ones that have a trickle impact, right? And a trickle effect for generation and generation and generation. This is who we've always been at the Vineyard. We have always been about expressing the compassionate care of Jesus Christ to the world around us. And now we have 7,200 square feet of donated space to make that happen. And I'm so excited to be on that journey with all of you. The third objective is simply expand our outreach. And we've had a lot of prep leading up to expand our outreach. We've had a lot of preamble on Sunday mornings, getting ready to talk to you all about the Love Foco Resource Center. That is the primary way that we're going to expand our outreach in the coming years, is renovating and opening that space and really bringing a cohesion to our entire campus. But before I get into all of the nuts and bolts of the Love Foco Resource Center and the giving campaign, I just want to, again, it's a room of leaders, and prayers and everything. So I just want to share some stuff with you, just a moment of transparency. This has been really hard. It's been really hard. And it's not just been hard because of the dead ends. Like, we've been on this journey for 2 years. And it hasn't just been hard because I spend like extra time on Zoom calls with a bunch of people from the city, and I'm learning about codes and policies that I never thought I'd ever in my life ever have to learn. Or the one-on-ones and the back and forth and all of the different things. It's hard to quantify to you today. So I'm asking you for prayer. Is that one of the things I've realized is there's a lot of spiritual warfare around this. Like, Satan does not want this to succeed. He would rather us just be an average church. That kind of talks, he's already mad that we're calling people to Christ. But if we start caring for the under-resourced and start looking for the overlooked in our community, start sacrificing for the least and the lost, listen, it's going to change this city. And Satan doesn't want that to succeed. And I don't know how to quantify it other than just telling you vulnerably, we have felt it. We've felt it. Our staff has felt it. It could be just plain old sickness, but it doesn't feel like it. Like, we've been taking care of a kid who's sick all week long, just barfing all over the place. I'm like trying to pray, Love Foco Resource Center, and then, taking care of a kid and writing. It all happens. It seems to all happen in moments like that. And so I know many of you pray for me. You grab me on Sunday, you text me, you email me. Keep praying. Keep praying. And our staff commits to praying for you. But there's some real warfare behind this, and I just want to share that with you as we step into this. Okay. Let's start by showing you a picture of our current donated building. This is going to blow you away. Look how beautiful this place is. It's a miracle. It is a miracle. Miracles come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Now, what you can't see is that inside those walls, there's even more miracles. There's moldy drywall and ceiling collapsing upon itself. There's all kinds of gnarly surprises inside. Every now and then you'll meet a person who has found their way into that building, and you just gently ask them to leave. Mostly that's Doug. Is Doug in that? Yeah, mostly that's Doug. God bless you, Doug. He keeps it clean as it can be. This is what the building looks like. But as we've been working with Airbnb, who I'm so thankful for, as we've been working with Elder Construction, I want to show you what this building is going to be transformed into once this gets taken care of. So you can really begin to see kind of the warm and welcoming environment that we want to create. Commonly, what happens when you're opening a resource or an outreach center is that you go like absolute bottom dollar. Now, we're not going top dollar. Hear me on that. We are not going top dollar, but we want it to be a warm and inviting atmosphere. So many folks who are at or below the poverty line are used to getting the leftovers. My mom lived on food stamps and WIC for a number of years, driving around town, picking up pop cans and returning them for 5 cents a piece. And anytime she got something new or anytime she got invited into something that was special, it was a unique treat for her. Because most of the time she was just getting the leftovers. And when you walk into that space with the overhang and the cedar and the dark colors and the logo, Matt, you can thank Matt because he basically came up with the entire color package and the logo. We're taking the inside of our church and we're putting it on the outside of that building to begin creating this cohesive campus plan so that it always feels like you're at the Vineyard. Even though we've named it the Love Foco Resource Center so that people who are maybe intimidated by darkening the doors of a church, instead of calling it something like the Vineyard Church of the Rockies Outreach Center, which would be fine, but I don't think it would capture the same amount of people. It wouldn't be as wide of a funnel as we really want it to be, as Love Foco will be. This will be a warm and inviting place. Now, I don't know if we have a slide maybe where we could show both of them back to back. If we don't, just go back to the old for a second. Let that image be burned into your brains. We'll take a tour on Sunday. And now to the new one. It's going to be so nice. It's going to be so nice. One of the phrases Convoy of Hope uses a lot, and we first met Convoy of Hope when we were doing inner city work in Kansas City, was that they see everyone who comes through their events or their doors or on their missions trips or whatever it is, they see them all as a guest of honor. And I think that we've created that experience on Sunday morning in our lobby. One of the key things I hear from newcomers is such a warm and inviting place. 5 or 10 people welcomed me to the church, invited me to sit with them, whatever it is. We want that kind of culture to be everywhere at the Vineyard. And it's going to start at the Love Foco Resource Center. Now let's move to the inside. Let's move to the inside. Now this isn't going to be a perfect rendering of what to expect, but it's going to be pretty darn close. These are conceptual drawings. If you've never seen a conceptual drawing, it means this is what we anticipate it being like. But once we, throw the shovel into that thing, we might discover some other things that might have to move a wall here or there, things like that. That's a reality of construction. But this is the conceptual drawing, and you can see already the different colors. If you can't see who they're appointed for, we'll get you this like on your phone so that you can reference it as you leave. But all of these different colors represent different nonprofits who have already signed up and say, we want to be in on this. So Christ Clinic is taking some offices. They're going to use that room in the middle. We've got Alpha Pregnancy Center, the boutique and the baby shower opportunities that they're going to create there. We've got reception and waiting rooms. We have offices that are going to be shared, and they're going to double up when Christ Clinic is at capacity. Serve 6-8 feeding and clothing anybody who is in need. We have this shared lounge. If we do a tour if you can join us on Sunday for the tour, you'll kind of see where we're talking about. And then when we do that tour, I'll give you the site so that you can look at that while you're walking around and really begin to envision all of this. But this is what we're going to do so that, again, 1,500 families can be served on any given month from the Love Foco Resource Center. And just a quick side note, this is the rendering that's getting sent to the city. Okay, and so what I've learned is that it's really good to identify everything when you're talking to the city. Don't leave any rock unturned because they'll just flip it over and say, well, what about that? You want to have an answer to that. Okay, so it says Christ Clinic like in that big room in the middle, but in reality on Tuesday nights, Alpha Pregnancy Center is doing a parenting class for teen moms there. And we might have a recovery class in there from time to time. We might have a small group in there from time to time. But we need to identify it so that when it goes before the decision makers, they realize we've thought through it all. And, the less questions you get asked, the better. That's what I'm learning. If you create questions, that's not good because they have lots of answers. They have lots of expensive answers. It's one of the reasons we love Fort Collins, though, isn't it? Listen, it's going to be amazing, but it will take a lot of work. I mean, everything has to be gutted in that building. You'll see on Sunday. If you remember the last time we did a tour once it got donated, you remember. It's pretty gnarly in there, and it is a conceptual drawing, so it's a little flexible. But I also want to, if you look at the shared lounge over here on this side, what you may not remember is there's a bunch of glass right there, and there's already some doors there. We're going to widen the doors, and then there's, landscaping that hasn't been touched in a few years and a privacy fence that blocks you from our green space. But we're going to eventually open all of that up and get it into the green space. Because one of the things that we want to do is we want to draw people closer and closer to our church. We want to invite them into the life of the local church. Our lives, your lives, have been changed by this church. There have been seasons where you've grown a lot. There have been seasons where you haven't been growing very much. But the trajectory of your life has changed because of this local church. We want that promise to be for everyone who goes to the Love Foco Resource Center. We want to invite them into the life of our local church. We want to invite them into ongoing discipleship. And one of the best ways we can do that is by creating a cohesion plan amongst our campus so that whenever they're at the Love Foco building, it feels like they're at the Vineyard. Whenever they're in that shared lounge and they're looking through the glass with that fence replaced, they can see little Johnny or little Susie running around our playground while they're being coached financially about how to take the next steps and find their own housing. Right? As they're getting coached, the kids are playing. When they're done being coached, they go out to the playground. That's the exact spot that our kids will be all summer long for VBS or for Sunday service. We want to invite people in, and I don't know if you've been out to the green space lately. It doesn't quite match Fort Collins green space. There's a pretty high standard for Fort Collins green space. Yeah, there it is. Don't go down the slide. Don't go down the slide. You might get stabbed with plastic that's sticking up. These things, they need to be addressed, right? You're not actually going to, okay? I told you this isn't church. This is a little different. So a little more loosey-goosey up here. My 5th cup of coffee after 6 o'clock tonight. We're gonna address this. We're going to address this. I'll show you. There we go. Eventually, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to go natural playgrounds. We're going to create a walking path all the way around that green space so that small groups and moms and dads can walk with one another while their kids play. Go to that grass space one more time, Josh. You can see Matt Farron in the distance in the red shirt playing guitar. That's our outdoor services, or anybody who's serving in that capacity. Of course, you can see down through the alleyway between the buildings, and you can see a little foreshadow for what I'm going to show you in those buildings to come. Now, look, as we look at these changes, and as we've gone through the process with the city, I mentioned it on Sunday, but one of the things that I learned is that our campus is kind of like one of your favorite shirts that you've worn for many years that has like a thread that's sticking out. And if you pull that thread, there's a chain reaction to that thread, and it begins to you have to address now the whole sleeve, right? And what we've learned in this process is that the minute you pull on that one little snag, there's going to be a chain reaction of things that we have to address. And I tried to allude to it a little bit on Sunday, but the reality is none of our property meets current code. That probably doesn't come as a shocker. If you have ever parked in our parking lot and made your way into our building without breaking an ankle, you know we probably don't hit city codes on very many things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have to ultimately and eventually address the entire campus. And the nice thing about that is there's great blessing in that, even if there's challenge in that. The blessing in that is that right now we have 3 very different looking buildings that will finally be able to address and make them all look warm, inviting, create that guest of honor experience so that everyone who is at any building knows they're always at the Vineyard. Here's our current space. Doesn't it just scream the presence of Jesus to you? We've been around for a while, so it probably doesn't bother you quite as much, but when you park 100 yards away from that monstrosity of an orange steel contraption, and then you slowly walk up to it while you're kind of doing high knees and dodging potholes. You gotta, if it's raining, you can't get accidentally baptized in the lake vineyard that forms over there. And you gotta get to the front doors, and then you can begin to experience the Lord. But listen, we all kind of know the building's got 8 different textures to it. I mean, it's just a fascinating thing. But you know what? It's ours. It's ours. That building's paid off. Another one got donated to us. They are our buildings. The Lord has gifted them to us, but we're also charged with stewarding them. We're also charged with passing them down to the next generation closer to or at city codes, so that whoever follows us has a place they can live into and pass their faith down to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. I was having lunch with a pastor who lives in Longmont. They're doing a building campaign too, and so we were swapping notes on what he's doing, what I'm doing, and their church has been around for 132 years. We've been around for 40. If we want to make it to 132 years, we've got to take care of our stuff. We've got to take care of our stuff. And so that's what we're going to be pressing into with the Love Foco giving campaign. We're going to address the exterior green space. We're going to address the exterior of our buildings to create a warm, welcoming, and really a sacred space, so that when people are coming into church, they are being invited into the presence. Here's a really weird statistic. You've probably heard me share this at previous Vision Nights if you've been here, if you're one of the 5-year folks. People, on general, non-Christians, choose and decide if they're ever coming back to your church again between the first 3 and 12 minutes. Okay, 3 and 12 minutes. Now, if you grew up at a vineyard in Grand Junction, you might give us 20 to 25 minutes. But most people are making their decision between 3 and 12 minutes. Now, if you have children and you've never been to our church before and you have to park 200 meters away, the timer starts when you put that car in park. Okay? Now, you might balk at people making decisions like that, but I'm just telling you, this is how people make decisions in American Christianity, especially people who don't know the Lord. The timer starts probably when they go to the website, to be honest, but Matt's done a great job of developing that for us. But the minute you park, the timer starts, 3 to 12 minutes. You're not going to hear me preach. You're probably not going to hear Matt or anyone else play a song, because it might take you that long to navigate your way into the building, get your kids checked in, ease your own anxiety, because if you haven't been to church in a while, you've got some anxiety. Get a cup of coffee. Strange people are talking to you and with tons of smiles and welcoming you to the vineyard and helping you feel so nice, which is really, really good. We actually have to do that. But this is an anxious moment for people. And the more anxiety they have, the shorter that number gets. So the phrase I use often is the 7-minute message, because it's right there in the middle between 3 and 12. On average, we've got 7 minutes to invite people back a second time. And aesthetics matter. The building matters. The way it feels. These are all kind of intuitive sensing things that we can't always put our minds to. In reality, in nonprofit and church budgets, facilities almost always get the back seat. And we've done that for a while. We've cared a lot more about what's going on in here. We've cared a lot more about building the culture and getting small groups going and raising the expectation and calling people to Christ, that every now and then we also have to look at the whole campus and say, okay, it's time. It's time. It's time to make sure that we're creating a warm and welcoming environment for anybody who might call our church home. So here's what we're going to be looking at doing. Again, show the picture of the old. This is where we're at, and this is where we're headed. Love Foco Resource Center, warehouse, and our current space. And this is like not the first drawing that's been created, because some of the first ones were even more expensive than these ones. And so we've been working it down. We're not changing a lot of exterior textures because that gets really, really expensive. But we're looking at creating a campus plan so that, again, no matter what building you're at, it feels like you're at the vineyard. There's going to be this same dark color here that's out on the monument sign. That's going to be translated to the different buildings Of course, we've got our logo. We finally have something on the front so people, again, you take it for granted because you've been coming here for a while. You know where the doors are. A lot of people don't actually, they park and they're like, what do I do? Where do I go? This is very strange. Well, now there's going to be an entryway. We're flirting with taking out the first 2 parking spots, one on either side of the front doors, putting some landscaping there so that it invites people in. This will help us serve everyone in our church. The Love Foco Resource Center will help us serve 1,500 families a month in a hospitable, warm, and inviting space. And of course, the extended, throw the grass spot up there one more time, the outside. In a green space that's not going to rival like New Belgium Brewery. We're not going to spend that kind of money on that, but we're going to spend money. And the reason is because, look at all of those faceless people. They've all been baptized. That's what I've decided. They've all been baptized. Listen, I'm thrilled about this, but it has caused some challenges. It's caused some challenges. That thread is getting pulled, but I want to remind you, I feel like the prophetic word that God gave to me and ultimately is giving to us from the book of Ezra and from the book of Nehemiah, that God's gracious hand is upon us. At one point, it says in Ezra, God's gracious hand is upon us, so get to work. I love that. And it resonates with me deeply because who would have ever thought we would have gotten $1 million asset donated to us from a medical company? God's gracious hand is upon us. He's been upon us from the very beginning when Rick and Becky planted this church 40 years ago. God's hand has been upon us. I was having lunch with Brian and Barb McLeese. Natalie and I were last week, and we talked about a lot of different things because Brian's been through a building campaign with his dad out in Oregon, and he was sharing blessed stories of what that was like. And he said, Jeff, one of the sweetest things about our story is that we're just following the miracles. We're following the miracles. And I told him we're going to need a few million more miracles. Multiple millions of miracles. But isn't that sweet? This is what we're doing. The Lord's hand is upon us, and we're following the miracles. The miracles don't always make things easy, but it does kind of tell you you're on the right path. It does kind of tell you that His blessing is upon us. And so as we've been working with Airbnb and Elder, and really most importantly for this next part of our conversation, as I've been working with the city of Fort Collins, not everything will be as easy as I hoped. I thought we could have a couple work days. We did a work day in here. You might remember we were rolling up carpet and we were knocking out tile, and we did quite a bit of work. It's not quite that easy anymore. Okay? It's not quite that easy anymore. The city, by the way, I just want to be really clear about this so there's no mistakes in my communication or your interpretation. The city's not playing hardball with us. It's not like they found a church who wants to improve their properties and they're like, you know what, we're going to stick it to the Lord. That's not happening. It's not happening. They just have really high standards. They have high standards. And they know a lot more about this than I do. I'll go toe-to-toe with them on the Synoptic Gospels, but they will beat me down with how stormwater is actually supposed to flow so that a city can function. I don't know any of that. I've been learning it, but I don't know any of it. They have high standards. And you know what? It's one of the reasons why we love our city so much. It's why we love our city so much. The only thing that's been challenging is that we're a nonprofit. So we can't just go sell more widgets in order to pay for this thing. We have to gather in spaces like this, and we have to pray about giving sacrificially so that we can make something like that happen. We have to advocate about these kinds of things with people that we know who want to feed the poor and care for the sick. And we need to get them on board even if they don't go to our church. It takes a different kind of sacrifice to make something like this happen in the nonprofit world, but Vineyard people are made for this. Vineyard people are made for this. I don't want to talk about all of the requirements. If you would like to talk to me about the codes, I would love to talk with you because I have too much stuff in my brain and I don't want to keep it to myself. But at least some of the permits that I've had to learn about are permeable concrete ratios that you need in your parking lot. Trees versus parking spaces, and how many trees you need for every parking space you have. This is a real thing. Did you know the city of Fort Collins bought fire trucks that are bigger than the old ones? And did you know that our cul-de-sac is not big enough for them to do a roundabout in anymore? So now we have to figure out how we're going to make that work. Right? And by the way, if you've never poured a road, it's really expensive to pour a road and to widen the cul-de-sac and to put curbs back on there. We're talking electric car charging stations that they're going to require and pedestrian access, because the clients that we're going to serve at Love Foco Resource Center, they're not all going to have their own cars. They're going to take public transit, and they're going to have to walk to that building. Well, guess what? It's really important to have citywide connectivity. It really is. But sidewalks are expensive. Sidewalks are really expensive, is what I've learned. And then there's this, I think the city referred to it as our historical problem. Our historical problem that got overlooked before, but it's not getting overlooked anymore. And it's what we affectionately refer to as Lake Vineyard. They don't like Lake Vineyard. We don't like it either, but the city is going to make us address Lake Vineyard. And if you've not noticed, if you've ever been on Riverside when it rains, it starts to rain and then like half of that lane is gone because there's no storm like drainage until you get to Prospect. So you just hydroplane all the way to that light, and then so we have to address this because that lake fills up, and then we have a pump that kicks it all out. And again, Doug cleans that pump out a couple times a year so that it can work. But they don't like it. They literally called it a historic problem. I got into myself a little trouble because they started talking about some of these things. And, this is when I realized I needed to go to the board and ask for Airbnb so we could pay a project coordinator. Because I said things like, man, it's getting really hard to care for the poor in our city. And I realized it just came out with the folks. They didn't really like that. One time I got challenged on the amount of trees we had and the wild birds that we were going to take care of. And I said, well, there are wild birds. They can just fly across those trees over there, across the other side of the road. I thought it was a pretty good idea, but that doesn't hit city codes like other trees within X amount of yardage of ours. It doesn't work. So anyway, I think I circled around and made some friends, but it was a rocky start. Listen, all of this is part of the thread. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to explain to you how complex this has actually become. But I don't want you to forget about the lives that are being changed. And I know I'm willing to pay that price. I'm willing to sacrificially give to that because I see down the road families and generations impacted with the gospel. And this is part of what it's going to take. So we went back to the drawing board with Airbnb and Elder. And, one of the things that I've learned is that they don't see our parking lot as different parking lots. They see it as one kind of contiguous thing. So if it rains over here, the water's going to go somewhere. And if we just change this but don't change that, then the water all pools here. So it's just a hot mess. So we have to change the whole thing. So we asked them, well, give us a drawing of something that's going to meet all the city codes that will still bring our campus together. And man, I was thrilled with what they came up with. Let's show the bird's eye view of the whole campus. And so you can kind of see down here is the Love Foco Resource Center, the larger rectangular building. That's this current space that we're in, and the alleyway to the warehouse. You can see the green space that's been remodeled. And we're talking about having to redo the whole parking lot. You can kind of see the access road there. There's no longer a cul-de-sac because what they realized was that the fire trucks, we can create what's called a hammerhead intersection. Again, too much information. Let's get back to the Synoptic Gospels. But a hammerhead intersection where they can basically do like a 2 or 3 point turn and get out of there, and that's going to meet their standard. But again, you have to destroy that and then build it back up. Those are big things to do. But everything in that picture meets the codes. And again, I want to remind you what this does for the 7-minute message, what it does to invite folks into our community. You park way back there, which right now you are breaking ankles and avoiding baptisms on your way into church. Now there's an artery that leads you straight to the front doors, right? And if you get on that walkway and you get on that artery, that anxiety that you're beginning to feel when you come to church for the first time with your kids, you're going to drop them off with strangers that you've never met, and you're not really sure if the preacher's going to be super judgmental or if he's going to be kind of cool with jeans and a t-shirt and maybe a good preacher. And these are the kinds of things we're hoping that people begin to experience on their way into church. A mentor of mine here locally is Derry Northrup. He runs Timberline Church, and man, every time I have coffee with Derry, I feel like Jesus is coming back soon. I mean, he just makes me feel so good as a young leader in our city. He's an elder in a lot of ways in our city, and their church is reaching the lost. I'm really thankful for Derry's mentorship in my life. And he told me last week when I met with him, I was telling him we're getting ready to do this, and he was praying for me, so gracious. And he said, Jeff, never apologize about spending money on things like this because facilities facilitate. That's what they do. You can't actually facilitate your ministry without a decent facility. And I've been around for 6 years, and we've navigated these things, and we've taken them off in small bites, and we definitely have improved the facilities. What I like the most is that we started with the guts of who we are, the culture, and creating things that we just knew God wanted us to do. We're going to continue to do that. But we didn't start with the outside of the cup and have the inside door. We started with the inside, and now we're working to the outside. Does that make sense? All right, so let's show the picture of all the future properties just so that we can get them up there again. In the next 5 to 10 minutes, what I want to talk to you about is kind of scope and sequence and price. Scope, sequence, and price. It's very unlikely that we're able to tackle all of that and the green space and the parking lot in one giant swoop. It's too much, right? It's too much, and it's probably a longer process. We'll probably have to move forward in 2 or 3 phases in order to capture all of this. But again, we're playing the long game. The reason why I'm showing you all of this instead of just one thing is I don't want you to think that we're like short-sighted in this vision. We have a vision for this church that's going to be handed down to our children and our children's children. And if you want to do that really, really well, you have to play the long game. You have to play the long game. And so we're probably looking at moving forward in 2 to 3 phases. And most of how we advance in that is going to come down to 2 things. How quickly we can raise money, because projects like this cost money, and how well the city responds. Now, I will say the city has responded really, really well to our first few phases. And there's a couple little gray areas on phase 3, 4, and 5 on which order that's going to go in. But I'm not intimidated by that because we know the next couple steps. And it would be foolish for me to stand in front of you and show you all these pictures and talk about the scope and sequence and tell you I have everything figured out. Anybody who's ever done a major project or led a product to the starting line and released it to the public knows that you have a vision and you begin to move forward and you learn things as you go, and then ultimately you're ready to kind of display everything. That's what we're going to have to do. We know the next few steps, and there's going to be a learning process as we go. Now, here's what I want to encourage you to consider. Here's what I'm asking you to do. Just honestly asking you to do. There may be gaps in my knowledge and what I'm learning from the city and what I can communicate to you on a weekly basis. Okay? Now, I'm committing to communicating all of that stuff to you. I'm communicating to be as transparent as I've ever been in all of those things. But there likely will be some gaps in what I'm learning and what you're hearing. I want to encourage you to fill those gaps with trust. Fill those gaps with trust, not suspicion or gossip or fear or wondering if whatever is going to happen. It just means that I haven't had the time, or like we still have to preach on Sunday and invite people to give their life to Christ and minister to one another. And there's going to be an order in how this comes. Fill that gap with trust for the next season. I hope that over the last 4 years of leading this church, I've developed trust in this room. If I haven't, let's meet. And you can tell me why you don't trust me, and I will invite you to develop that trust. This is how relationships grow. It's how they build, right? We have to do those kinds of things together. Okay, most of the projects that you see behind me land somewhere between 3 and 6 months from start to finish. So they're not terribly long projects. And of course, if someone wins the lottery, like I don't know when's the lottery get drawn out, like the weekend. If you win the lottery on the weekend, tithe to Vineyard Church of the Rockies on those winnings, and this thing we'll knock this out in 6 months. We can stack projects on top of each other, and there's some benefit to that, right? Because then all of your labors are working at the same time, and you're tackling more projects at once, and your money goes further. But the odds are we won't be able to start all 5 projects, parking lot, green space, all 3 buildings at the same time. And so we'll have different processes for different things. Here's where I feel like the Lord is taking us in the next few steps. This is phase 1. Phase 1 is opening the Love Focal Resource Center and starting the campus cohesion plan by uniting the exteriors of our buildings. The exteriors of our buildings and the Love Focal Resource Center. By unifying all of the spaces, no matter what building you're at, you'll feel like you're at the Vineyard. We'll be able to create this, and that building will be open. The Love Focal Resource Center will be open, serving 1,500 families a month. The total cost of that entire project is $3 million. $3 million, and the goal is 24 months. 24 months. I started with 12, and then I realized by adding another 12 months, a couple things happen. We can apply for more grants, and I think we'll win some. People who can only give monthly because maybe you haven't established large amounts of savings, you have another 12 months where you can give a monthly gift to that. And if you're a high capacity giver with larger amounts of savings, your donations can be spread out over a couple calendar years to ease the tax liability of what you gain in a normal year. Okay? 24 months, $3 million. Phase 2, don't say it out loud, but just think to your head, is phase 2 bigger or smaller than phase 1? That's that nervous laugh. I'm beginning to learn your laugh. I think you're beginning to learn mine as well. Phase 2 could be broken into 2 parts, but it includes the green space and the whole parking lot that we show. Throw a parking lot up there again, Josh. Phase 2 would include the green space and the parking lot. The good news is I got word last week from the city that we can do about 85% of phase 1 before we approach phase 2. That's really good news. They're not going to make us do the parking lot first. That's like millions of dollars of news. So that's really, really positive for us. But phase 2 eventually will come, and we'll have to address phase 2. The total project cost of the green space and the entire parking lot renovation is about $5 million. And a lot of that's wrapped up in concrete, taking it out, and reestablishing it. Turns out sidewalks and roads are pretty expensive. And I asked them, can't we just resurface it all and plant a couple trees out there and develop a watering team where we all just take turns watering those? And they said, that's a really cute idea, Jeff, but again, it's one contiguous plan. If it rains over there, the water goes somewhere, and actually we need to get it into the safe spots. We need to have the drainage go in the right way, and right now, none of your property meets current code. And so we've got to address it. And whoever follows me will not have to address it again, which is a really positive thing. For an idea, if you just want to have fun, I just sit in my office and I'm getting anxious and I'm wow, that's a really big number. What do? I just break it up by parking spots. It's about $12,000 per parking spot. And so in a moment when we hand out pledge cards, if you want to start at 12, you can start at 12. If you want to get multiple parking spots, I'll get some chalk out there and write your name on a spot. It'll rain, it'll wash your name away, but you could do that if you want to. You could do that. Listen, we're going to look at every possible resource available to us. I've been talking about that for the last couple of weeks. We're launching a giving campaign tonight. I'm going to do it again on Sunday. We're writing grants. We've got a great grant writing team. Even Vineyard USA has caught wind of this. Again, it's good to be proximate to the president and his people. But they caught wind of this, and they have a development officer and a grant writer at Vineyard USA that's going to come alongside our grant writing team, Jeff Taylor and Debbie Barlin, and they're going to help us do this. Because they realize that churches who are leading people to Jesus and caring for the poor and pressing into naturally supernatural life change cities. They transform cities. And that's what we're all about. We're joining God's mission, transforming all things, transforming our city, transforming the people who live in it, and transforming the neighborhoods all around us. All around us. Now, before I talk about pledges, I want to give you just a quick note And I invite further conversation about this with me one-on-one. But I want to give you a quick note about operational costs or ongoing costs about opening the Love Foco Resource Center. Because as I was preparing this, I thought to myself, some of you might wonder, like, well, how are we going to pay for this thing once it's open? And you will be excited to learn that, well, 100% of anyone's donation that's in this room or anyone that you talk to will go directly to the project. It won't go to staffing budgets. It won't go to anything. That's our part of our annual budget. 100% of it will go to opening the doors at Love Foco. But we don't need a single dollar for operation costs. We've pre-planned all of that. We've been working, again, we've had this building for a couple of years. We've had time to prepare for this. Other nonprofits are going to be taking care of part of their expenses. And we've already been paying property insurance. We've already been paying utilities. Now the utilities are going to go up a little bit, but they've already been at a certain amount because I've been doing tours. And I've been getting people in the room. I'm getting nonprofits in the room. All of these things have already been taking place. We already have a budget line item for fixing broken windows when people smash it so that they can get in there. Thanks, Doug. Taking care of the property. We've already been operating in this space. It's already part of our annual budget. And then there's this really cool thing. We have this benevolence or this impact fund that many of you give to. You might not know this, but every dollar you give to the vineyard, we put part of it in what's called benevolence or our impact fund. So that when we meet a family or an individual who is in dire need, we take it from that budget and we get them on their feet again, whether that's first month's rent or paying over to utilities or buying them tires so they can get to their jobs so they can pay their own bills. And we, through the benevolence offering of our church, we support families in need. But by partnering with Serve 6-8, they're going to be in that space, and they have a giant benevolence financial emergency package. And they're going to be using that to partner with us, which means we get to take our benevolence money and we get to use it for operational costs for the Love Foco Resource Center. We just move it from one cell to the next cell, and it begins to pay for itself so that we can keep the doors open so that nonprofits can do what they do best. Does that kind of make sense? I'm glad. $3 million in 24 months, phase one. That's step one. That's the initial goal. And because some of you have shifted your weight 5 or 6 times since I started talking about numbers, then let me just remind you that the gracious hand of the Lord is upon us. He's got this. Now, it's going to require sacrifice. It's going to require sacrifice from us in this room. It's going to require sacrifice from people in our city, but it will be done. Excuse me. I want to get to the pledges. So staff, where are my staff? Can you guys, like old ushers passing out the offering bags, can you walk around and pass out pledge cards? And even if you're here and you're like, I don't even know why I'm here, I don't go to this church, I'm not giving to this project, take a pledge card and give it to someone else because they might. No, but take a pledge card. We're going to take a look at these. And as these are being handed out to you, you'll see that there's all kinds of information on here. You'll see that these can work for almost anyone in the city, whether they follow Jesus or not. Matt has created a website. He had the foresight 2 years ago to buy the address lovefoco.com, and it's live now. Lovefoco.com has all of these graphics. It has all of our journey. It has where we're headed, and it has how people can get involved. And so as you're talking with people about this, you can send them to lovefoco.com. But if you look at this, there's a whole thing that you can participate in. One, the big part's going to be for us. If you pray and discern and you know what God's inviting you to give, fill out both, tear it at the perforated thing, keep the reminder for you. Just as accountability between you and the Lord and a reminder because we tend to forget things. And turn the big section of that card into the offering boxes or a staff member. And even if you've pledged to me personally, like before this night, we've had conversations and you're like, I know what I'm going to give, Jeff. Do us a favor and still fill one of those out because it's going to allow us to track it and know how far we are so that when I communicate to the church about progress, I'm giving a real number about where we're at. Okay? Now, there's a couple things that I want to tell you as you look at this. There's all kinds of creative ways that you can give. But a couple things that I want you to think about. One, we're still going to do the one day to feed the world offering in the fall. This isn't replacing that. This is in addition to that. We're going to not forget about our international friends. Can we Can we commit to that as a church? The international work that we're doing through Convoy of Hope and in Zimbabwe is still really, really, really important to the heart of God, and it's still really important to our church. And so in October, we're going to do one day to feed the world. Okay? The other thing is that I've had 2 dreams leading up to this moment. One I think was from anxiety, and one I think was from the Lord. The anxious dream was that Mary Ann, who's on our team, she walked up to me and she said, Jeff, I'm not giving to the church anymore. I'm giving everything to the building campaign. And then I woke up. That's the anxious dream. If you didn't know, I told Mary Ann, and she confirmed that they weren't going to do that. But this is not an invitation for you to say, well, I give X amount of dollars to the church, so now I'll just give 50% of that to my tithes and 50% of that to the building campaign. We can't do that. We still have ministries to run. So truly, I want you to hear me. We're asking, we believe in tithing to your local church, and we believe in offerings that go above and beyond that. This would be an offering type of gift. This would be an offering type of gift. And so we're inviting you to maintain your tithes and offerings while you do this. The second dream was, I think, from the Lord. And it was just a really simple dream. I had a spreadsheet in front of me, and I knew it was the Lord because I don't look at spreadsheets very often. But this spreadsheet was before me, and most of the names were blurred out. But most of the dollar amounts of what they have given was clear. And most of them were they weren't exorbitant amounts. You know, a project like this, $3 million in 24 months, usually they talk about like a giving pyramid. You need 3 or 4 people to give $150,000 or more. You need 10 or 15 people to give between 50 and 100. You need 100 people to give, 10 to 50, and you need 2,000 people to give 5,000 or something like that. That's kind of how some of this stuff is thought about. But on this spreadsheet, almost everything was a 5-digit gift. And I remember looking at it and saying, Lord, how are we going to get there without like a $500,000 gift? By the way, if you came ready to pledge $500,000, you should pledge $500,000. Don't take this as a prophetic dream for you to lower your pledge. Keep that zero on there, okay? But listen, every pledge counts. And I actually think there's a lot of pledges in this room tonight, but I think there's a lot of pledges out in that city. I think there's a lot of people who could give a 10 or a 20 or a 30 or a 50 or a $75,000 gift that want to serve the poor, clothe the naked, feed the hungry, care for the sick. This is Matthew 25, by the way, when we meet Jesus in Judgment Day, and he says, you fed me and you clothed me, you visited me, you cared for me. And we say, when did we do that? And he said, if you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. If you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Now I'm starting to preach. It's getting a little bit more like Sunday. But I am passionate about this, and there are people in our church, and there are people all around our city that are passionate about this too. We just have to get the word out, and I think we have to lead the way. I think we in this church, as our community, we have to lead the way. The other thing that I want to say is if you're like, Jeff, a 5-digit gift is impossible for me. I literally can't do it. Then let me remind you about the teaching. It wasn't a teaching, it was a real-life story from Mark 12, the life of Jesus. He was in the temple watching people give their gifts. And the rich came and they gave. And the poor widow came and she gave nothing but a widow's mite. And Jesus turned and looked at his disciples and he said, she gave more than everybody else. She gave all that she had. See, the rich gave out of their surplus, Jesus said, but she gave it all. And I think what Jesus is maybe telling some of us is that every dollar counts. Every dollar counts. Because he's looking at the motivation of the heart, not just the dollar amount. Right? And let me also say, boldly, to those of you who God has blessed financially in this life, let me encourage you not to give out of surplus, but give out of sacrifice. Give out of sacrifice on behalf of brothers and sisters. You know, earlier in this little meeting, I had you raise your hand if it was your first time here. I bet we could do another similar thing. I won't do it, but just imagine with me, if I had everybody stand who has never given to a giving campaign to this church. I bet it would be a lot of us. It would be me. I've never given to a building campaign here. Some of you have. But you know what? Right now, those of you who have, you're surrounded by people that you didn't know 10 years ago. And because of your generosity, they're here with us today in this beautiful space. And now it's time for all of us to collectively do that again. And imagine 5 years from now, who's going to be baptized right here that we meet from the Love Foco Resource Center? Who's going to be discipled? What kind of church planters are we going to meet? And full-time ministers are we going to meet through the Love FOCO Resource Center? There are a lot of creative ways you can give. Not only have I learned a lot about city codes, I've also learned a lot about retirement money. And I've learned about like QCDs. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what mandatory withdrawals were. I'm 38. I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff right now. But I've learned that there's all kinds of creative ways. There was a financial planner who doesn't go to our church, but is the financial advisor, I guess, for someone in our church. And when he heard about this project, he said, I want your pastor to send me a one-page summary of this project. I want to learn more about this. This guy doesn't go to our church, but he's got all kinds of clients who are looking for ways to actually care for the poor. Now he's got a one-page summary that he can point him to. See, there's all kinds of things that God is already doing. One thing that I do have a sense of is that we've got the whole gamut in our church. We've got the widows' mite givers, but I also feel like the Lord has just laid on my heart to just throw out here that I think that we have some Barnabas givers in our church. If you're not familiar with Barnabas, he was the guy that moved around the early church world with Paul. But in Acts 4, before they went on their missions trip, it says that Barnabas sold a whole field and gave it to the early church. It doesn't say that he sold all of his fields, by the way. It says he sold a field and he gave it all to the church. And I wonder who in our church and who you might know that's supposed to sell a field and give it to this project. It might be you. You might be a serial entrepreneur. And you might have been thinking, I've been thinking about selling this business. Or you might be a property owner. I've been thinking about selling this property. What if God was calling you to be a Barnabas giver to this project? I'll let you sit with that. And I'll let you take that into conversations that you have with other people as well. Because I imagine that there's going to be Barnabas givers behind this. Final thought, and then we're going to release you to walk around the building. The final thought is this. It's because I'm a golfer and my son's a golfer, and I'm a preacher, so I can't help but think about little acronyms that help us remember. When you think about this pledge card, think about more than just this pledge card. I want you to think about the PGA. When you think about the PGA, 3 ways that you can support this project is by praying, by giving, and by advocating. Praying, giving, and advocating. Big visions require big prayers. I've already told you about the spiritual warfare behind this. Satan does not want us to care for the poor, and he does not want us to keep calling people to Christ, and he does not want us to teach people how to walk in the Spirit. He doesn't want us to do that. So pray and keep praying. Give and give sacrificially, not out of surplus, but out of sacrifice to the Lord's work. And advocate. We all have relational networks. Talk to people about this. Send them to lovefoco.com. You throw a party, I'll come to your house. I'll do the ask. I'll do all the hard parts. I'll get all the awkward looks from people I've never met when I ask them to give a 5-digit gift or a 6-figure gift or whatever it is. I'll make the asks if you'll gather the people. Advocate for this. This is something worth putting energy behind because it's near and dear to the heart of God. As Brian McLeese said, we're following the miracles. There's no better place to be. So let's follow them together. The gracious hand of the Lord is upon us, Vineyard. It's time to get to work. It's time to get to work. Let's pray. God, thank you for this building. And it's a big undertaking, Lord. And we would be fish out of water if it wasn't for your Spirit, if it wasn't for your presence, if it wasn't for your wisdom, and if it wasn't for your voice. So we lean on it again and again and again and again. As I was reading this morning in the Gospel of John, you can't do anything unless the Lord gives it to you. Lord, you have given us this building and you've given us so much more. Help us to steward it for your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, before Natalie comes up to preach, I want to briefly share the last kind of important announcement around the Love FOCO Resource Center. You know, I've been taking time each Sunday morning and a lot of time at Vision Night to talk about the Love FOCO Resource Center. This morning, I'm going to talk about the cost, and I'm going to talk about ways that you can begin to participate. The cost and ways you can participate. We talked about this a lot on Wednesday night at Vision Night. We recorded that, and soon I'll send an all-church email with all of the links to every Sunday message that I've had leading up to this very Sunday, as well as Vision Night. And you'll be getting that as well as an introduction to the website that Matt created called lovefoco.com. He had the foresight to buy that web address a long time ago, and we were updating it with all the information. But you may have already seen there's a pledge card in the chair, in the pocket right in front of you. If you want to go ahead and grab that, it looks like this. You can pull it out and take a look at it as I share some information. And if you're tuning in online, you can go to lovefoco.com right now. A lot of the information that I'm sharing will be at lovefoco.com, and you can follow that on the online link as well. You'll see on this card that the initial goal is to raise $3 million in 24 months. $3 million in 24 months. And you'll also see and read that this isn't the scope of the entire project, because the city is eventually going to require us to address this giant sea of concrete out here called our parking lot. And there's a lot of city codes that we have to meet in order to get that to an appropriate space. But we have some fantastic news, and the news is this, that the city is going to put that towards the tail end of the sequence. So we can completely renovate the Love Foco Resource Center, get it open so that we can begin serving Northern Colorado before we have to address the incredible infrastructure cost of the parking lot. And that's really, really good news. And I want to talk this morning about ways, again, that you can participate starting today, but also what this is going to look like moving forward. So let's start by talking about what $3 million in 24 months will do. I just briefly mentioned it, but it will completely and totally renovate the building that was donated to our church. Everything will be fixed. All the city codes inside that building will be met, and the doors will be opened so that collectively with our other nonprofit partners, we can begin to serve up to 1,500 families a month. And that'll be the first thing that we're able to do, of course, introducing them to the life of our local church, and most importantly, the love of Jesus Christ. That we are serving because we've met Jesus and we found out he really cares about serving the under-resourced in our community. During this first phase of the $3 million, we're also going to get a chance to update the exterior of all of our buildings so that we can begin to implement what we're calling our campus cohesion plan. Because if you haven't noticed, or maybe you've just been here for a while and you've forgotten, when you park in that parking lot, after you kind of dodge potholes so you don't break an ankle or get baptized on accident when that parking lot fills up with water, that's a real thing. It actually happens. You haven't been here for that. Just wait till the spring. But all of our buildings, they look dramatically different. We have 3 buildings now. We've been spoiled from the Lord. We have 3 buildings on our campus, but they all look radically different, and we want to create a warm and inviting atmosphere no matter which building you're at, so that every time you're on our campus, it feels like you're at the Vineyard. And we can invite you from one building to the next, so that we can, again, offer this comprehensive care and spiritual need to everyone who calls our space home. I've got some quick visuals for you. This is the current state of our buildings. These are what our buildings currently look like, and there's mixed reactions to that. Some are like, well, it doesn't look like a church. That's really, really great. And others are like, that doesn't look sacred at all, and I'm not sure what those buildings are. But I will tell you, I'm so thankful for them. I'm so thankful for them. And, when you start with one of those buildings being donated, everything else is kind of icing on top of the cake. And so that's a really, really good news. But I am excited to bring a sense of cohesion behind our entire campus. And through our design team, and with the goal, again, of creating a church plan that doesn't just impact our generation, but is passed down for generations and generations to come. I shared a sweet little anecdote. I was having lunch with a pastor of a church in Longmont. His church has been around for 142 years. Our church has been around for 40, almost 41. And the only way we ever get to 142 is if we steward all of the things that God has given to us for his glory. Well, with the help of our design team, this is going to be the future look of our 3 buildings. Why don't you throw that next slide up there? This is the Love Foco Resource Center. This is the warehouse, what's commonly called as the warehouse. Young Life offices out of that space, as well as youth and young adults, and overflow space for conferences meet there. And that's our main campus as well. And I don't know how that hits you. I've seen these pictures a lot. I still love them. I still love them every time we look at it. It's the same color scheme everywhere, that dark color with the cedar accent for warmth. some landscaping to help people feel at ease. And, it's a shocker, but just like putting our name by the front doors is helpful so that people know where to go. I mean, it's mind-boggling, right? But yeah, that would be a really, really good thing. Signage is important. So phase 1, again, of the Love Foco Giving Campaign, it gets all of these spaces finished. It gets the Love Foco Giving Resource Center, renovated, and all of that happens $3 million in 24 months. And we just feel like the Lord is saying, now is the time. Now is the time to go all in on this space that we've called home for so long, to renovate, update, so that we can begin to serve our community together in more dynamic ways. And there's a lot to say in the future about parking lot requirements and how our green space will work together between all of the buildings, all the city codes like permeable and impermeable concrete, or the fact that we need pedestrian access and emergency vehicle access. We currently don't have those up to city code, so we'll have to work on those details. And again, you'll learn about more of that if you watch the Vision Night recording. But I just wanted to show you this morning that phase 1 is going to be an incredible ministry, or the beginning of an incredible ministry in and through this church. After service today, about 15 minutes or so after I mingle and chat with everybody, we're actually going to unlock the doors of the Love Foco Resource Center. We'll give you a tour. And it's pretty gnarly in there. You'll see where some of that money is going to go. But it's going to be a great way for you to ask questions and maybe see that space and get acquainted with the Love Foco Resource Center. Let me kind of wrap this announcement part of it up by just encouraging you this morning to join the Vineyard as we launch into this giving campaign. There's 3 ways that you can participate in the Love Foco Giving Campaign. I would encourage you to participate in all 3 of them. And the best way to think about it is to think about golf. Think about the Professional Golf Association, PGA. That acronym is going to stand for Pray, Give, and Advocate. This is what we're inviting you to do. We're inviting you to pray, give, and advocate. Listen, the reality is that big vision requires big prayers. And right now, we're on this launch pad, stepping into the Love Foco Resource Center, and the devil doesn't want us to move forward in this. And we're beginning to experience some spiritual warfare around this. The reality is that Satan likes inconsequential churches. Churches that aren't motivated to join God's mission and transform all things. Churches that are easily forgotten. And the minute we drew a line in the sand and we said we want to join God's mission of transforming all things, and we want to dedicate an entire building of ours to serving the under-resourced in our community, pointing them to the love of Jesus Christ, then it kind of became game on, and we painted a target on our own backs in some way. And we need prayer. We need you to continue praying for this process, for favor with the city, for generosity to be poured out, and for our leadership team, because we are beginning to experience what we would call spiritual warfare. I'm also asking you to give. That's the second letter in PGA. G is for give. The reality is, facilities are necessary to facilitate ministry. And we're ready to dedicate a third of our space to caring for the under-resourced in our community, and none of it happens without our collective and sacrificial generosity. If you take a look at that pledge card, you'll see there's a lot of different ways you can give. You can make an initial gift to get us started. Those are really important because they help us pay for some of the initial fees like demolition and architecture and design fees, as well as they provide space for grants to see that we have skin in the game and we're able to receive some of those matching grants. But you can also make pledges for future donations. Maybe you know there's a tax return coming. Maybe you know there's a bonus coming. Maybe you know there's something happening in your future and you can't give the fullness of your gift today, but you can give something in the future. That's a great way to take advantage of those pledges. And I just want to say your generosity will have a direct and immediate impact on our community. These are the folks that we drive past every single day. These are the folks that we work with and we live by and we serve and we care for and we engage with in our city. That's where your generosity is going to go. And when you give, I would expect that you will receive some kind of blessing from God. Now, I'm not a prosperity gospel guy. We're not a prosperity gospel kind of church. but there's enough scripture that it makes a pretty clear case that when you sacrificially give, God blesses you. And I don't know what that's going to look like. As you give, you might experience God's peace in your life where there once was stress or anxiety. As you give, you might experience a new spiritual hunger and a new spiritual thirst for the Word of God, for the place of prayer. You may experience His presence in a new kind of way. You'll definitely begin fighting against the love of money, which honestly, like our culture is known for. Every time you give, you fight against the love of money. You could experience freedom from that. All of those things could be yours, but one thing I know for sure is that you cannot outgive God's blessing on your life. You can't. And I wouldn't be surprised if you stumbled into all kinds of spiritual growth and fruit from this endeavor. As I've prayed about this and leading up to Vision Night as well as this morning, I think the Lord is already speaking to some of us about ways that we can engage. And one of the things I feel like that's really kind of on my heart is to pray for Barnabas givers. To pray for Barnabas givers. If you've ever read the book of Acts, this is the book of the Bible that talks about the birth of the early church. And in Acts 4, there's a gentleman named Barnabas who sells a whole field and gives it to the early church. And I think that among us, either in this room or online, or people that we haven't even met yet, there are people called to be Barnabas givers. That whatever that proverbial field is for you, that you're called to sell it all and give it to the poor. And this would be a context to make that happen. Projects like Love Foco, of course, they require some really significant gifts, some six-figure gifts. We're still looking for our first like $250,000 to $500,000 gift to make this happen. But it's also going to take a whole bunch of people giving monthly or giving $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 or $25,000 over the course of the next few years. It's going to take an entire church coming together. And I love that in Scripture, Jesus makes it very clear that it's not about the total dollar amount that you give, but it's about the heart in which you give. That even if you don't have a lot, if you give out of a place of love and sacrifice, that God accounts it to your heavenly blessing. Something happens when we collectively give together. All gifts can be made to Vineyard Church of the Rockies with Love Foco in the memo line. If you give online, we have a drop-down button for Love Foco. We would encourage you to do that as well. We're inviting people to pray and to give in the next couple of weeks, or at least turn in their pledge cards. That allows us to kind of know the progress we've made and what kind of next steps we can take as a church. And that brings me to the final letter, the letter A, which is for advocate. Pray, give, and advocate. We are inviting you to advocate on our behalf. We want to exhaust every possible resource that's available to us, and you can help us by advocating for this cause. There are believers outside of our church who want to care for the poor. There are believers who don't call this church their home, who want to serve the under-resourced in our community, and we're inviting you to advocate on our behalf. Talk to them about what's happening with the Love Foco Resource Center. And when we share info with you, just forward that email. Just forward that information on and advocate on our behalf. And here's something that I'm really looking forward to, because I'm evangelistically bent and I love sharing the love of Jesus with folks who don't yet follow him, is there are non-Christians who want to give back. There are people who don't yet follow Jesus that will be captivated by kingdom people and churches who actually took the teachings of Jesus seriously when he said to care for the least of these among you. This is a compelling vision, and if you will be bold and you will advocate on our behalf, I think we'll all be surprised at how often people get on board with the Love Foco Resource Center. So I'm just inviting you this morning to talk to your parents, to talk to your coworkers and your neighbors, your bosses, whatever kind of relational network you have. Talk to your friends or your frenemies. It doesn't matter. Talk to them all. And if you throw a party and you collect a variety of people in your home for a meal to learn about Love Foco Resource Center, you can invite me and I'll make the ask. I'll relieve you of the awkward thing where you invite people to financially give. I happen to really like talking about this kind of stuff. And I love discipling people away from the love of money and towards the love of Jesus Christ. And so if you throw a party, I'll come and I'll make the ask. And then when I leave, you can blame everything on me. It's okay. But by you advocating on our behalf, you will help us to transform the lives of up to 1,500 families a month in and around Fort Collins. Listen, I am so excited about the future of this church. And from the depths of my heart, I am so excited that we get to do these things together. That it's all of us uniting together to advance the kingdom of God and care for our city and the greater Larimer County area. Again, if you're here in this room, grab that pledge card, pray about that. Pray about giving to that, pray about advocating to that. But also, if you're online, let me just share with you, this is your church too. This is your church too, and we would invite you to pray, give, and advocate in the same exact way that I'm inviting everybody here in this room to participate as well. Join us in the mission of transforming all things. This is what God has before us, and I know collectively will make an incredible impact for generations and generations to come. Let's pray.